Hey there, this is John from Heroes and Legends, and welcome to day 4 of official Amonkhet previews. As you can see by the title screen here, we have another huge card to talk about with Liliana Deck's Majesty, and we have a whole bunch to talk about, so I don't want to waste any more time. Let's get right into it. We're going to begin with 3 cards that have been previously spoiled via leaks, but have now been confirmed by Wizards. The first is Dusk to Dawn. Now, we've talked about this in a previous video, so I won't go into a lot of detail here, but if you're interested in my thoughts, definitely check out the playlist. You'll find it there, but this has been confirmed. This got inadvertently leaked or spoiled, I guess, from Wizards themselves when a couple of these cards showed up in some packs of Modern Masters 2017 during release weekend. So we known about this one for a little while. I will say, though, the Noah Bradley art is incredible on this card. Alright, let's talk about some Planeswalker decks. Now, quickly, if you're not aware of what this product is, every time we have a new standard release, Wizards releases 2 Planeswalker decks. In each of those Planeswalker decks, you'll find cards from the new set, so you'll find Amonkhet cards, but you're also going to find 4 cards that are exclusive just to those particular decks, so 8 altogether, 2 of which, of course, are the premium foil Planeswalkers that you see on the screen here. Now, even though you can't find these particular 8 cards in the Amonkhet set, they are standard legal, and you can play them in any format that Amonkhet is legal in. Now, the cards you see on the screen, the 2 Planeswalkers, they have been previously leaked, and we've talked about them in the past in another video, so again, I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail here. I will say, though, this is the first time we're seeing them completely revealed and confirmed by Wizards, and we now know both of them have 5 loyalty. That was a point that was missing when we did our last video. One thing I will say, these particular Planeswalkers are truly designed to really not make an impact on standard. They try to overcost them to the point that they are meant to be casual cards. Sometimes they're good commander cards, and I have seen some folks play them in commander decks. Sometimes they're just fun to sit down and play these 2 decks against each other or brew something at your kitchen table. I don't really expect these to see standard play, but I'm just going to throw the caveat out there to think about. It is a Gideon, and we saw a card yesterday where Gideons matter. So perhaps, maybe, does this show up in a tribal Gideon build? I don't know. That seems like a stretch. As long as Ally of Zendikar doesn't get banned or something, I think you just use those as well as the Gideon we saw yesterday. I don't know if you even need this Gideon at that point, but I guess time will tell. Alright, let's look at some of the other exclusive cards. Now, each deck has had one common exclusive card already revealed. We talked about those again in a previous day, but let's look at the ones that were revealed as of today. First, we have Gideon's Resolve. These 3 are all in the Gideon deck, of course. And there's always a way to search up the particular Planeswalker that comes in these decks. In this case, this is a way to search for Gideon, Marshall, Paragon, but this is the only Gideon you can search for. You can't search for any Gideon. However, when it comes into play, it's an enchantment. It's also an Anthem effect, too. So it's a decent card, but again, at this cost and the fact that you can only get that particular Gideon, I don't really see this crossing over into standard or anything like that. Same with the next card, Companion of the Trials. A 2/2 for a white and 2. It has flying. It's a little overcosted just on its own, but the ability, pay a white and 1, you can untap target creature, but you can only do that if you have a Gideon in play. Now, does it have to be the Gideon that this deck comes with? It can be any Gideon in this case, but at the same time, I just don't feel like that's economical enough. Thirdly, we have Stone Quarry. This is a reprint. This is here just simply to help make this deck work and for some color fixing. Alright, let's look at the new cards from the Liliana deck. And we have Liliana's Influence, 2 black and 4. You get to put a -1/-1 counter on each creature you don't control, and you also get to search Liliana Death Wielder and put that into your hand. So again, very overcosted for what this does. You can only search for that one particular Liliana. Desecrated Naga. This card's kind of interesting if it didn't have the ability dependent on the fact that you have to control a Liliana to activate it. Because it's a decent card, a black and 2 for a 3/2 zombie Naga. If you pay a black and 3, you get to drain an opponent for 2 life, but you can only do that if you have a Liliana Planeswalker in play. That makes this card a lot less valuable to play, I think. So again, I don't think it's going to cross over outside of just casual play. And then finally, they reprinted Foul Orchard, again, for your mana fixing. All right, let's get into the new cards that you'll actually find in the Amonkhet set now. And let's just go ahead and cut to the chase. Liliana Deck's Majesty, 2 black and 3 5 loyalty. Of course, this is a mythic Planeswalker Liliana. +1, create a 2/2 black zombie creature token. Put the top 2 cards of your library into your graveyard. -3, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. That creature is a black zombie in addition to other colors and types. -7, destroy all non-zombie creatures. First off, before I get into the card itself, I have to say the art is amazing. I love the Cleopatra version of Liliana with all the mummy zombies around her. I think that is incredible. Fantastic piece of art. Secondly, the card itself is actually pretty awesome, I think. It costs 5. It's a little bit on the higher end scale of casting costs that you would see maybe in Standard, for example. However, you are getting 5 loyalty out of it, and you're getting a ton of versatility on top of that. Here's the thing. You can go a couple routes with this card. You can simply play this for 5 and -3 it and reanimate something. Like, that could be your whole strategy around having this card in play. And after that, everything else is gravy. You're just trying to reanimate some huge creature out of your graveyard. And there are some good targets in Standard right now. I mean, there's still 2 Eldrazi Titans that haven't been banned, right? Not to mention some other really big creatures that could be good out there, too, that you could choose from. So I think in Standard, I think paying 5 for a reanimation spell is great. And the fact that even if you did that, it doesn't mean she's gone either. You have a chance to still find more value out of her. That's great for 5 mana. I'm happy to do that. There could be some decks just simply trying to build around that. Now, that alone, I don't know if it would be a good win condition, because there is a number of cards, at least we've seen so far, that fall under the category of graveyard hate. So you do have to be a little careful if you go all in on that sort of win condition. However, she does something else too. She makes zombie tokens. So she helps contribute to a zombie tribal, which maybe plays well with some of the embalm mechanics that we've been seeing, things of that nature. So I think there's a couple ways you could go with this card. Maybe make one a plan A, one a plan B. But I do think due to the versatility, she will see Standard play. As far as Modern goes, I don't know if I see her there. Or at least I don't know if I see a role for her today. Maybe sometime in the future, just because reanimation can be done a little more cost effectively already in that format. But in Standard, I think she'll be great. She'll be great in Commander. Awesome if you happen to open her in Limited. She's going to be a bomb for sure. I really like this card a lot. Awesome design, awesome art, everything about it. All right, let's move on to some Exert cards. And these were all spoiled in the same article from Wizards today, and they're just 3 cards to play along with the Exert mechanic. We have Glorybound Initiate. It's a white and 1 human warrior 3/1. When you exert this, though, it gets +1/+3 and lifelink till end of turn. That's a big swing. If you attack in on turn 3 with this, but 4/4 lifelinker, your opponent's probably going to have to find an answer real quick, or they're in trouble. Granted, when it's not attacking in with the Exert ability, it is pretty fragile with 1 toughness. But if you just get an 8-point swing out of it one time even, that's actually pretty good for 2 mana. So I do like this card a lot. And it makes me wonder if perhaps White Weenie could become a thing. I mean, Always Watching is still in the format. I kind of wonder if you had Always Watching and this able to basically exert every time and not have that penalty. That's kind of awesome. The next card is Watchful Naga. It's a green and 2, Naga Wizard, 2/2. This one's an uncommon. If you choose to exert it, you get to draw a card. Now, you're paying 3 for a 2/2. By the time you attack with it, best case scenario, it's probably turn 4, maybe turn 5 in some cases, depending on how things go. And I think the best case scenario for your card here is you attack in, exert, trade, because your opponent's going to want to get this off the table. They don't want you drawing more cards later, and this replaces itself. That's actually not bad. In Limited, I'm happy to do that. I don't know if it'll cross over into Standard, but I think this is actually a very viable Limited card. And finally, we have Battlefield Scavenger, a red and 1, 2/2 Jackal Rogue. You may exert this as it attacks, but this is interesting. Whenever you exert a creature, you may discard a card if you do draw a card. So you can attack with this and exert to rummage, or you can just let other things attack and exert, and this will trigger a rummage. You could do multiple ones on a combat step. So I find that actually pretty intriguing, again, for the more aggressive red decks out there, because you don't want to draw into too much land in those decks. You want to be able to get rid of that land, replace it. Rummaging is great for that. So this actually, again, makes sense in those aggro red, maybe Rakdos decks, but it seems like we're getting a lot of pieces for this deck. And because of that, I do think it's going to make its way into Standard. This could be a part of it for sure. But again, even if it doesn't get there, it's going to be good and Limited. All right, let's look at some white cards, starting with Regal Caracal. 2 white and 3. This is a cat, 3/3. Other cats you control get +1/+1 and have lifelink. And when this enters the battlefield, you get 2 1/1 white cat creature tokens with lifelink. This is a rare. Alright, so we got a cat lord. I mean, that's amazing, right? I didn't know we needed a cat lord necessarily, but I'm very happy to see it. Like, that's awesome. So there's a number of great cats in the history of Magic. If you wanted to sit down and try to create a cat commander deck now, you probably could. That's pretty amazing. Or just a kitchen table deck. You just sit down and you just put all the cats in it for these and you just go cat tribal. That's amazing, right? Now, is this just a novelty card? No, actually, I don't think it is, because you're getting a lot of power and toughness for 5 mana. I mean, you put this on the board, you're getting 7/7 power and toughness for 5. That's very, very economical. Not to mention 4 of its lifelink on top of that, and how this can interact with other cards. Again, maybe even in a white weenie style deck, this could be the top of the curve. Gives you some life gain to combat any sort of big plays your opponent could come at you with later in the game. And on top of it, granted it doesn't really affect the tokens, but always watching makes this card a little bit better. So there you go. I think this actually could potentially see standard play again if that archetype can get there. But regardless, this is also a very good card from Limited. Even if you don't have any other cats, it's still a big powerhouse to put down for 5 mana. Curator of Mysteries. Here's another really good card. This one's a rare 2 blue and 2. It's a Sphinx creature, flying 4/4. Whenever you cycle or discard another card, scry 1, and you can cycle this away for 1 blue. Alright, so if you watched the Market Watch on Saturday, it was the last one we did, we talked about Living End was starting to spike because there was speculation that this set was going to bring forth some new cycling cards. Living End likes cycling creatures for obvious reasons. And maybe that could become a new thing in Modern. There's already a pretty decent Living End deck in Modern, but I think a lot of folks were trying to find ways to make that better, or else even just brew something completely new. Well, you know what? If you were going to do that, this is probably the card you're going to start with. First off, the raw power behind this card, paying 4, especially for blue, for a 4/4 flyer, that is phenomenal. I mean, I would think 5 for a 4/4 flyer in blue is pretty typical, but you're taking a mana off that, plus it has more upside on top of it. This is phenomenal. The ability to perhaps scry, even if it's just a few times over the course of the game, could be game-changing. And the cycling effect, which means if I do get stuck on mana early on, maybe can't get that second blue or something, I can cycle it away and hopefully get that mana I need. It's a super versatile card. It is in its own just kind of a stompy blue beater too. I mean, I think this could be actually a control deck finisher. I think it's that good. So this card is going to definitely see play in Standard. It could see some Modern play. Again, if that Living End deck can come to fruition, I think this card could be in it. I also think this is phenomenal just about in any format. I mean, Commander, this is going to be great. This is an awesome limited bomb for you too. Really, really strong card here. As Foretold, another real good blue card. A blue and 2. This one's a mythic enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, put a time counter on As Foretold. Once each turn, not just your turn, each turn, you may pay 0 rather than pay the mana cost for a spell you cast when convert a mana cost to X or less, where X is the number of time counters on As Foretold. So again, I want to point that out too, X or less. So it doesn't kind of pigeonhole you into just one type of converted mana cost. It will allow you to do that or less, and that makes it extremely versatile. So here's what's awesome about this card. Let's say I'm playing a control deck. I don't want to tap out to play my win condition, my creature that's going to get out there and start beating down like the Sphinx we just saw. I don't necessarily have to do that now. I play the center in 3. Now granted, maybe I'm putting my shields down to play it. High risk, high reward though. A lot of good can come from this after that point. That Sphinx goes down a few turns later. I can start attacking in. I never had to put my shields down. I can hold on to my counter magic and just try to ride that to victory. And what's nice is I put the Sphinx down for free, say go. My opponent tries to cast a removal spell. I can cast a free counter spell, and I still have mana up if I need to have a second counter spell to play or something like that. It really speeds up control decks. So control decks sometimes can't act early on because they're building their mana base. They have to really think about when they're going to go for it with a counter spell, especially if they have 2 counter spells in their hand but only enough mana to play 1. They have to play a little more conservatively. This puts a lot more options on the table for you as the game dwells on. I think this card is amazing. Blue a lot of times gets the mythic that's more of the commander mythic, but this time they got a really versatile one. I think this will definitely see play in control decks and standard. I think it could see some modern play as well with the 3 casting cost mark, maybe even some of the eternal formats. It's also an incredibly good card to play in commander, I think, in a lot of decks. This is another one of those mythics that I think a lot of people are going to want to get their hands on, especially right when the set drops. Keep an eye on this one for sure. Scarab Feast. This is a nice sideboard card. It costs a black. It's an instant common. Exile up to 3 target cards from a single graveyard, and you can cycle it away for 1 black. So it's nice. You can cycle it away if things aren't going your way and you don't have a target for this. But I could see this maybe being in sideboards in standard due to the fact that we already know Delirium can be an issue at times in the meta. Also, we're adding all this other crazy stuff to the graveyards between these aftermath spells and embalm creatures and so on and so forth. You may need a way to protect yourself against that. This is definitely here as a stopgap to keep those strategies from running too wild. So I'm glad it exists. Same thing in limited. You're probably not main decking this necessarily, but you'll be happy that it's in your sideboard when you need it. Insult to Injury. So we got a red split card. This one's a rare. Insult. Pay a red and 2 sorcery. Damage can't be prevented this turn. If a source you control would deal damage this turn, it deals double that damage instead. And then Injury, a red and 2 sorcery. It has Aftermath. It will deal 2 damage to target creature and 2 damage to target player. Alright. I don't know, this feels like reverse to me. I almost feel like Injury should have been the top part and Insult should have been the aftermath. I don't know, but it's Insult to Injury, so I guess they couldn't do that. But here's the deal. This card, another one of these amazing red aggro cards. Like, this is phenomenal in the red aggro deck, right? Now, it's almost like they're just like building this deck for us at this point. Every day, there's 2 or 3 cards that I'm saying, this would be amazing in a mono red deck or a Rakdos deck. Same exact story here. This card I think we'll see play in standard just due to the fact that it just feels like that deck's super pushed right now. I guess we'll see how things pan out once we get the full set, but at least right now, I do think that this will see standard play. It's going to be great for you in limited as well. Got a pair of green commons here to talk about quickly. Colossipede, it's a green at 4, insect 5/5, vanilla, pouncing cheetah. This one's a cat. Green and 2, 3/2 with flash. Maybe cat tribal? I don't know. So first off, Colossipede, not much to say about it. I mean, this is a good beater for limited. 5/5 for 5. You'll be happy to play it. Nothing much more to it. The pouncing cheetah, same thing. I think this is more of a limited card as long as we don't get to cat tribal being a thing, which I don't know if we'll get there, but at the same time, it's an interesting thought. This is going to be good for you, though, in limited, for sure. 3/2 with flash lets you surprise your opponent, maybe trade up occasionally. Still has good stats, only costing 3. Mouth to Feed. This is a split green card. A green and 2, sorcery. Create a 3/3 green hippo creature token. Feed, pay a green and 3. It's a sorcery with Aftermath. Draw a card for each creature you control, power 3 or greater. Again, I see this more of a limited card, at least right now. There's a chance that this could work well with some of the other cards that are bolstering tokens that we've seen so far due to the fact that they're trying to play well with the embalm cards. This is a little different. This isn't a embalm token. This is actually a good old-fashioned green stoppy token. And I haven't seen enough pieces yet to make me feel like this could get into standard, but we still have a lot of the set to see. However, I will say this. I'd be more than happy to play this in limited anytime. Next, we have a 2-color split card with Failure to Comply. A blue and 1 instant, return target spell to its owner's hand, and then Comply is a white sorcery. Aftermath, choose a card name. Until your next turn, your opponents can't cast spells with the chosen name. And do note that is opponents. Now, when I look at this card, I see a great tempo card for control, no doubt. My question to myself, I guess, is do I like this better than Reflector Mage? I don't know if I do. I like Reflector Mage quite a bit, and I've played with that one firsthand. I know what that can do. This is a little different. It might be an unfair comparison in some ways, but overall, if I had to choose one or the other, at least on paper right now, I'm kind of leaning towards Reflector Mage, but I do think it's still a very good tempo card for control. Now, a couple things. First off, it has the ability to target any spell on the stack, so that's kind of nice. Secondly, that second ability is going to slow your opponent down for another turn, at least with that one particular spell. So if you're ahead and things are going well for you, maybe you don't have a counterspell though for whatever reason, or maybe you do and you're just trying to drag the game out a little more because your win condition's doing its work. Your opponent plays something, maybe your removal spell for your win condition. You play this, bounce it back to their hand. On your next turn, you just pay 1 white and say, nope, can't do it next turn either. So now you get 2 turns of more beatdowns, basically, before you have to deal with their removal spell in a more permanent way, like a counter spell that hopefully you have in your hand or maybe you drew into over the course of the next couple turns. Same thing if you're behind. If your opponent's about to kind of come down on you with a big creature that you don't have an answer to, maybe you don't have a counter spell at the moment, then you just go ahead, bounce it, next turn say, nope, can't play it, lets you draw a couple more cards and maybe hit what you need to deal with that creature. Things of that nature. So it's versatile, super versatile, and I do like the fact that it's divided into 2 pieces, which makes both pieces very, very cheap, a 2 casting cost and a 1 casting cost. And that's usually the hallmark of really good cards, cheap cards that have big effects. This is definitely a cheap card that has a big effect. So I don't want to sound too hard on it, comparing it to Reflector Mage, which was a card I really, really liked. This card, I think, is probably at least close to it, if nothing else. And because of that, yes, it's going to see play in Standard as long as there's a control deck that is still popular out there as the meta shifts, which I think there will be. There feels like there's enough pieces for control decks to continue to flourish. Even if they are Saheeli control decks or what have you, they're still going to be out there. I think this card is going to be just fine, if not great, in those decks. And secondly, it's very, very playable in a control style build in Limited as well. Rags to Riches. This one's interesting because it's a double color split card that is very color intensive. I mean, it's a double black on one side and a double blue on the other. The rag side, 2 black and 2. It's a rare. All creatures get -2/-2 till end of turn. Riches, 2 black and 5. Sorcery with Aftermath. Each opponent chooses a creature he or she controls. You gain control of those creatures. I'm not too into the riches side of this card. It's a little expensive, and best case scenario, you're getting your opponent's worst creature, right? So sometimes that will work out if you happen to be playing against somebody who's maybe on a reanimation strategy or a control strategy, and for some reason they can't counter this, and you're able to take their win condition or something like that, then wonderful. But that's not going to happen all that frequently, I don't think, especially for that casting cost. It just doesn't feel that great to me. It is an option, considering you're playing it out of your graveyard. It is like a free card in some ways, so that's not a bad thing. I won't put it down too badly, but again, I don't see myself getting a lot of value out of it. Even in a commander game, like, you're going to get all your opponent's worst creatures. You're going to end up with a bunch of 2/2s that have weird abilities, right? Like, so I don't know. It's fine. The first part, the rags part, is more interesting because this is a card that you can board in against players playing with small toughness creatures, whether that's a aggro red deck, for example, or a white weenie deck. Now, the caveat to that is you can't be in the deck playing a lot of small creatures to make that work. So I see this as potentially a sideboard card, maybe in Standard, depending on where the meta goes. But more than likely, this is a card you pull out of your sideboard if your opponent's playing a lot of small toughness creatures in Limited. Alright, another split card with Cut 2 Ribbons, a red and 1 sorcery. Cut deals 4 damage to target creature. Now, it's not instant speed, can't hit players, but it does allow you to deal with some threats that maybe you just can't deal with any other way. Some big threats. Ribbons, 2 black and X, sorcery with Aftermath. Each opponent loses X life. I'd like this one quite a bit. Now, this is the first card I've seen that makes me feel like maybe I do want to play Rakdos aggro as opposed to just mono red aggro. And here's the deal. This might not necessarily even be a main deck card. Depending on matchups, this might be better in some matchups than others. But I side it in if I need it, and then the tempo I lost by having to play the cut side of this as opposed to, say, playing another creature that can attack, I could later make up by the ribbon side by forcing my opponent just to lose life. And even if you get a couple of these in your graveyard by the end of the game, if you whittle your opponent down far enough, you can put them away. A lot of times the hardest part of playing red aggro is getting those last like 5 points of damage on your opponent. This makes it a little bit easier. This is intriguing to me. I do think it could see some Standard play again. It might be out of the sideboard in a deck like that, but it has its potential. I think the power level's there. It's actually a cool multiplayer card, so if you're thinking Commander, because it does hit all opponents, so that's definitely worthy to note. The ribbon side is, anyway. And yeah, finally, I'd be happy to play this in Limited, even if I'm just playing the cut side. That's a very economical and a limited game. Next we have a gold card, Apache Vizier of Poisons. I guess this is their take on Cleopatra. A black and green legendary creature, human cleric, 2/2, Whenever this deals combat damage to a player, you may put a -1/-1 counter on target creature. Whenever you put one or more -1/-1 counters on a creature, create a 1/1 green snake creature token with the Death Touch. That actually seems quite good for 2 mana. Okay, there's a few drawbacks here. First off, it is legendary, so you can't work in multiples at the same time. Secondly, it's a 2/2 for 2, which is good. It's got tons of upside. But as far as that first ability goes, it's not going to be able to get in there for damage probably as frequently as you would like it to. This card excels, though, if you have other ways to put -1/-1 counters on creatures. We've already seen Archfiend of Ifnir, for example. That seems like it would play really well with this. There's a number of green creatures that let you put -1/-1 counters on things you control, for example. Again, this would create a token when you do that. If you're getting rid of something that maybe you don't need anymore, replacing it with a 1/1 Death Touch token, something like that, and still getting a nice-sized creature on the battlefield, because those are some pretty big creatures. There's a lot of different things you can be doing with this in those colors. I really like this, and the fact that the snake tokens have Death Touch really makes this feel like a powerful card in some circumstances. Someone's going to have to figure out tempo-wise how to make this work, because it's not an easy thing to necessarily make work, at least with the pieces we've seen so far. We're going to need more pieces. I'm sure we will get them. There's still a whole lot more cards to reveal. If someone could solve that, though, this could potentially be a very good standard deck. And you have to start thinking, too, of implications that this card could possibly have even in Modern. I'm thinking about how it pairs with things like Persist, Wither, and maybe most importantly, Infect. Don't know if that would pan out either. Again, I'd have to test that tempo-wise to see how it affects something like an Infect deck, but it's an interesting thought early on, if nothing else. And aside from all that, it's legendary. This could be actually a really fun commander, too. So there's a lot of different directions you could go with this card. I really like their design here. Next is an artifact. It's Throne of the God Pharaoh. This costs 2. It's a legendary artifact rare. At the beginning of your end step, each opponent loses life equal to the number of tapped creatures you control. Here's another each opponent, so keep that in mind for multiplayer games. I get it. I see what they're trying to do here. They're trying to give you some sort of bonus for using exert creatures and being able to mitigate that exert cost a little bit. But I don't know if I'm quite there. I don't know if that quite does it for me to make me feel like this is worth playing. This makes sense in some ways in an aggro deck, because you're going to be attacking in as much as possible, and then you're doing a couple extra points of damage here and there, and that could be good. But here's the trade-off. On turn 2, I played this as opposed to playing some other aggressive haste creature or something like that. And I'm trading the 3-4 points of damage that creature might have got by with for the 3-4 points of damage that this is going to do. I don't know. It just feels a little like I'm taking my eye off the ball with this card, that I'm playing another game entirely if I'm trying to shoehorn this into a aggressive deck, and it feels a little weird to me. Having said that, are there other implications for it? There probably are. I'm sure someone will come up with something cute with this. It could be something in Commander, even if you can tap a bunch of creatures. The only thing that makes it difficult is the damage happens on your end step. So you have to tap all your stuff and leave yourself open. So in a multiplayer game, you can't really afford to do that a lot of the time. So I don't know. It doesn't feel like it's a super great card. It is cheap and is doing something that is very conditional on the board state at the same time, so that nullifies its cheapness, because yes, I can play this on turn 2, but what am I getting out of it on turn 3 and turn 4? Maybe not a whole lot, maybe a point of damage here and there. Is that really worth it, or could I have done something more with my turn that turn? That's what you have to think about when you look at cards like this. So, I don't know, someone could come up with something interesting or different, no doubt, but at least face value-wise for me on this one, I'm not super excited about it. Having said that, those are the cards for today. Quickly before we go, I just want to say thank you to everybody who supported us on Patreon and who's made purchases through our Amazon affiliate links. If you'd like to know how to support the channel, check out the description below. We're actually very close to our next Patreon goal if you check out our Patreon page. And also, if you check out our Amazon affiliate store, any purchases you make by any sellers on Amazon through those links, a small percentage will come back to help support the channel. Honestly, I have to say thank you now more than ever. I've been having a lot of issues. I mentioned this briefly yesterday, but a lot of issues with the YouTube revenue. If you haven't heard, YouTube is being boycotted by a number of big companies when it comes to advertising. I won't get into all the details here. You can definitely check it out probably in a number of locations on YouTube to find out more information, but it's a long story. But long story short, the way that affects me is I'm making about 1/5 of what I was making a week ago or 2 weeks ago from these videos, and that is painful. It's making it very difficult for me to keep doing these, quite honestly, but I'm going to make it through. I have faith anyway that YouTube's trying to fix the issue. And on top of that, I picked up another side gig that's going to pay a little bit in the real world. So that's going to help. And I'm going to try to not lose any video content. That's my goal anyway. So again, long story short, thank you for supporting me. I'd appreciate anyone who wants to check those things out down below. But until next time, if you're watching on YouTube, please remember to like and subscribe. If you're watching on VidMe, please remember to upvote and subscribe. And have a great day. Hey, thanks for watching. This video is made possible by the generous support of viewers like you on Patreon. Check out the description below for links to our Patreon page as well as our Amazon affiliate store, where a small percentage of all sales will also help support the channel. Finally, if you haven't had a chance yet to subscribe, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any new videos on Heroes and Legends. Talk to you again soon, and have a great day.